Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another Opinions of Omni video. Today, we're going to take a look at why I believe that SK is going to win the major, and also why I think that G2 might be the only team that can actually stop them from doing such a thing. Not Astralis, not FaZe, but G2. And I might make a separate video discussing just how probable I think it is that G2 will make it into a position in which they can end SK's tournament run. But the way in which I thought I would evaluate SK's chances is basically just looking at their map pool and looking at their map wins from the past 3 months, because I think that looking at the past 3 months is more efficient than looking at their map pool since Phelps joined, because I do think that Phelps has now kind of found his place within the system, and SK have kind of revolutionized their now hybrid way of playing the game, which in the meta of having to be proficient at both the loose style as well as the tactical and slow pace of playing the game. And so let's just dive right into it. Let's start with Inferno. They have a 7-4 record at the moment, with significant losses to, well, G2 at in the ESL One Cologne group stage, and also FaZe at the IEM Sydney finals. Conversely, I mean, they beat Astralis at ECS as well as FaZe at ECS, so that tells me that on Inferno, it's kind of, I mean, if we choose to ignore ESL One Cologne from FaZe's point of view, I don't think that we necessarily should, but it was kind of an anomaly if we compare their level of play, since they picked up Nico. I mean, they made four straight finals, and they looked way better than they did at ESL One Cologne. To be honest, they looked fairly fucking shit. So what this basically tells me is, SK have proven that they can lose to FaZe, but they can also beat FaZe, as well as Astralis. I mean, they beat Astralis. It doesn't seem like Astralis can fuck with them on Inferno, just because, I mean, we all know how incredible SK are at, playing the end game, so to speak, of a map when you get into those final rounds, and it just doesn't feel like, Astralis has an edge when it comes to that. The difference with G2 is that G2 kind of rides or dies with how well they start, and how well they can kind of snowball into a match. I mean, we know that they love their double up setup with Shocks, and sometimes it's a hit, sometimes it's a miss, but as far as their head-to-head with SK, they've proven that, they can take them on Inferno. And so that's going to be, just one more weapon in the arsenal for G2 when it comes to taking down SK in a best-of-3 series, So, yeah, that's Inferno. I mean, the record is, as I said, 7-4. These are just a significant map, wins and losses they've had, so basically 2 significant wins and 2 significant losses. The rest are kind of smatterings here and there of, group stage upsets or various shit like that. Basically just, versus tier 2, which in my opinion isn't really relevant when evaluating how well SK are going to do, just because of the my assumption is that they're going to win the major, unless G2 has something else to say. Then moving on to Cobblestone, which they've played 10 times. They've won 9 out of those 10 games, or out of those 10 maps. They've 1 loss, and honestly, their Cobblestone is probably, just looking at the stats, the biggest illusion in their map pool. Yes, they have a 90% win rate, but to be completely honest, they only have like considerable wins versus, I think, like C9 twice or 3 times, I can't really remember, and then like a win versus North. Both teams that, aren't really of the same caliber when it comes to, the top four, but at the same time, I know, like, we know that Astralis and FaZe don't play Cobblestone. And, I mean, their only loss is to G2 at ESL Pro League Season 5, so yet again, it kind of shows that, G2 might have an edge on this map going into it. I mean, SK have a 9-1 record that doesn't tell us anything because their only actual, the only considerable team they played on it is G2, and they lost, at the ESL Pro League Season Final. So that's pretty much Cobblestone, and it's no fault of SK. I mean, sure, who's gonna play them on it? It's gonna be G2, right? And they've only played it once, so it's still kind of up in the air, as to who might be able to take that in a matchup, but it just shows the fact that G2 actually has a win over them. It shows that G2 is kind of slowly creeping into this SK map pool, and with a good veto, actually have a great a great chance and quite the opportunity if they should meet in, let's say, a quarterfinals or semifinals of the major, maybe even the finals. That would be pretty sick. And honestly, depending on what G2 shows up, I think that G2 might actually be G2 SK, that is, might actually be the best final that we could see at this major, just considering the map pool and how equal it seems that they can be on a lot of these maps, especially in a best of three. They we get an amazing veto, then I think that all of a sudden we get another amazing major final. But moving on, however, to Train, in which they have an 8-2 record, but the only considerable wins, in fact, that they have on Train is wins over FaZe at ECS, of course, one in that final, and then, of course, in the final of Sydney. So, I mean, they have 2 wins in best of threes versus FaZe. FaZe, arguably, that second or third best team. As of right now, what has been proven, they're definitely the second best. Who knows what Astralis are going to do, but they just haven't played enough in the past 3 months for us to be able to put them in that second place in the world. But SK have proven on Train that FaZe will not phase them. It's just that simple. When it comes to Train, SK are going to beat out FaZe, apparently. And the only actual loss they have as well, interestingly enough, is the Cloud9 at CS Summit, which is so long ago, and it's such a shit-tier tournament that it doesn't really matter, right? I mean, it's kind of insignificant at this point. I mean, the only other loss they had was the stupid fucking tiebreaker at ESL Pro League Season 5, where they lost against Envious, I think 4-1, because they played those stupid fucking overtime things, and then they also won versus Fnatic and in that tiebreaker. And I mean, it's obviously that doesn't count as a fucking map win, right? So Train is still kind of up in the air. I mean, at least they've proven that FaZe is no match against them on it. So that's definitely going to be something that they can use coming into the major. I mean, just considering their proficiency on it. I mean, if FaZe is not a bad Train team at all. Like Nico is a fucking god tier carry most of the time on a map like Train. And it remains to be seen, what Astralis might, bring to the table. But thus far, I mean, on these maps, SK have proven that they will beat out the top 3, as it were, the Holy Trinity, and then only narrowly lose to G2, the kind of the dark horse, the one knocking on that top three gate, as it were. So just on these first 3 maps, I mean, nobody's gonna fuck with them on Cobblestone, first of all. I mean, even Gambit have proven that they're human on that map, as well as Overpass. I mean, they used to boast these like incredible records, but not anymore. They've proven now that that era of being unstoppable on Overpass and Cobblestone is over. And unfortunately for Gambit, I mean, coming into the major with Cobblestone as one of your best maps is not going to be good, because right now it's all about Mirage, it's all about Inferno, it's all about fucking Overpass, pretty much. Maybe a Cache in there as well, but those three are the fucking maps that everyone's going to be fucking playing. So those are the maps that you want to, prove that you can play with proficiency. Moving on, however, to Cache, SK have actually a pretty good record on Cache. They have an 11-3 record, and it quite interesting, the story of how they picked up Cache, considering how it used to be their permaban with FNX right now. Coming in with Phelps, the past 3 months, they've really shown that, Cache is one of our maps. We know how to move around on Cache. We know how to rotate. We know how to play the T side, and they really do. I mean, even on the CT side, it seems like they always boost up Taco on the Shroud spot on the A site of Cache, and it always feels like he gets at least 2 kills, if not more. It just feels like the way that SK are playing now, it works so well on Cache because the confidence they have, the aggressiveness they have on the CT side, I mean, teams know that they're going to do it. They just can't do anything against it. I mean, if Fur is going to get flashed in with the help of fucking Coldzera, into that A main, basically just into A main, what the hell are you going to do? You have 2 of the best fucking players in the world that just make these insane aggressive plays on the CT side. Coldzera not as much, but he's there as a support. I mean, we saw it against I'm trying to... It might have been Fnatic, actually, that DreamHack Summer. In the DreamHack Summer final, where they'd consistently just push A main. Have Fur go in as that first man, and then Coldzera, usually it would be with an AWP, he'd jump in, up on those boxes, and then just hold the entrance from T. And I mean, when a team is allowed to do this fucking all the time and just consistently on Cache, there are a few teams that are going to be able to deal with that, unless they come in an anti-strat, which we saw with Space Soldiers in their 16-14 upset in the ESL 1 Cologne group stage, that first round. I mean, we saw it, quite a bit, how Space Soldiers, they had a couple ideas going into the map. They probably knew that they might be playing Cache, and so they set up and prepared for Fur's aggressions and just SK's CT aggression in general. But there aren't many that are going to fuck with them on this map. I mean, the losses they have, they have a loss at G2 yet again at Pro League, and Immortals at DreamHack Summer. And the Immortals loss, who the fuck knows, right? It might have just, it was in the group stage. Immortals, we know that they're fucking incredibly inconsistent. KNG and Henny might go off. And sure, yeah, if that happens, they might edge out SK in a best of 1, right? That might happen. I mean, it's Counter-Strike at the end of the day. It's not going to be impossible. But it's not too telling, Their loss to Immortals, even their loss to Space Soldiers, because Space Soldiers seem to have a fucking game plan going into that game, and they still only won 16-14. And I mean, look, what the fuck were they able to fucking do in the rest of the tournament? They weren't doing shit, so those losses aren't too telling. I mean, the loss to G2 was the one that interests me, because here again we have a situation in which G2 has another map in which they've proven that they can beat SK in the playoffs. And sure, I mean, still the fucking what's the word I'm looking for? I mean, the data is still kind of lacking, right? The amount of data. Fuck, there's a word. It's escaping me right now. But whatever. Like, there still isn't enough data to prove that, G2 will consistently fucking beat them out on these maps. But the fact that they have and haven't lost to them on these maps, don't read too much into it, but it's still an indicator that, you know, the fucking possibility is there. You know, so that's kind of cool. I will say that I did forget to mention that SK do in fact have a win versus G2 on cash. It was at ECS, right? So still 1-1. I mean, it's more than, you know, FaZe and Astralis can say. So you know, it's looking kind of good for G2 going into this major if they can get, you know, a series versus SK. I think they're probably one of the few teams that could actually give SK a run for their money in a series. So, you know, hopefully it happens. Anyways, moving on to Mirage. They have a record of 9-3 with wins versus, of course, you know, Fnatic at Cologne. That was the fifth round, right? The decider game. Also, they have a win versus Fnatic at GMX Summer in that final, of course. Right. They also have a win versus VP at Cologne in the play or in the group stage. I mean, that's, you know, that doesn't mean anything really, but I mean, at least the reason why I chose to include it as somewhat considerable is because, I mean, we know that VP have brought some things to the table. We also know that VP is historically a good Mirage team. So sure, it might not be that significant, but they do have a map win versus VP on Mirage. They also beat Astralis on Mirage at ECS, and then, you know, the rest of their wins are basically just a smattering of tier 2s. That's how that goes. But the losses, I mean, they lost to Optic in the Cologne quarters on Mirage, and that was just basically because, I mean, that doesn't mean fucking shit, in my opinion, because basically what happened was that Optic came in, guns fucking blazing, no care in the world, and just fucking, you know, had one of the most intense starts I think I've ever seen, versus SK, you know, in a quarters. And then what happened was, by the end of that map, you know, the SK started creeping back, and then we saw what happened throughout the entire series. They couldn't fuck with them on Cobblestone or the fuck was the last map? Cash? No. I can't remember. But the point is that, you know, Optic couldn't fuck with them at all. You know, once SK felt the heat of that first map. So, I mean, that's like, sure, you have a loss to Optic in a quarterfinal, but how, you know, how much of the story does that tell? Not much, in my opinion. They did have at ECS in the ECS final. They did have that loss to FaZe, and of course the only map they lost to CLG in that DreamHack Summer semis was also Mirage. So, I mean, despite being one of the best teams in the fucking world on Mirage, they've shown that, you know, actually only in playoffs that, you know, Mirage, especially if it's like, it tends to be the first map that is played, right? Like in the case of like versus CLG and versus Optic was the first map they played. And who the fuck knows if it's, you know, oh, we might just be fucking underestimating these, you know, kind of the shit tier North American teams. I mean, honestly, it's like, sure, CLG have had some like pretty crazy upsets, and they've actually done some shit internationally. And sure, Optic had this run at ESL 1 Cologne, but compared to SK, that, you know, SK knows that they should be winning against these teams, right? And then, you know, who the fuck knows if it's a psychological or mental thing going into that first map of the series that, oh well, I guess we gotta, you know, strap ourselves in for the next games, because now we're going to take you on a goddamn ride and we're going to destroy you pretty much. So those losses don't tell too much. The loss versus FaZe in the ECS final, I guess that's pretty, you know, that's actually kind of considerable, and it's something that, you know, It's a map that FaZe have proven that, you know what, Mirage might be something. And we know that Mirage might be FaZe's best map. I mean, FaZe's T-side on Mirage, ever since like the E-League Major, honestly, has been impressive. So that might be an avenue for FaZe to kind of, edge out SK. I mean, they've lost, 3 straight best-of-3 series versus SK now. But there's always hope. Who knows what can happen. All right, so the next map is Overpass, and they have a 4-4 record on Overpass, with wins versus basically FaZe and then two shit tier teams. The FaZe wins obviously being the Cologne semis that we saw. They completely fucking just bombed them out 16-4. Like, get the fuck out of here. And of course in the Sydney final. Now, however, the interesting thing is that their losses are, I mean, they lost to Fnatic in the DreamHack Summer Final. I think it was 16-4. So they got completely fucked. They lost to Astralis at the ECS semis. Even though winning the series, they did lose on Overpass. I mean, but Astralis, one of the best Overpass teams in the world, if not the best Overpass team in the world. And they lost to G2 in the Pro League semis. So, yet again, G2 creep in and take another map, over SK in this battle of the map pools. And, I mean, it feels like SK should be a good Overpass team, but they just aren't. They can win versus FaZe, but all the other, top tier teams, I mean, we've seen Astralis, G2, can't beat them. I mean, they even get fucked by Fnatic on Overpass. So it feels like the second you disrupt the setups they try to do on T-side, I mean, that's what we saw in the Fnatic game. It was basically just Dennis pushing fucking mid as CT and just killing them over and over and over and over and over again. So if you have CT aggression on Overpass, I think you can pretty fucking easily beat SK on Overpass. I mean, it just feels like it's as simple as that. I mean, either that or you just edge them out tactically. I mean, like an Astralis. Yeah, I mean, the final map in the pool is Nuke, but I mean, they haven't even played Nuke in the past 3 months. So let's not even fucking discuss it, right? It's useless to, because we have no fucking clue. The interesting thing about Nuke, however, is that G2 are incredible on Nuke. So it's another thing that G2 have over their head. I mean, obviously, SK are going to be forced to ban Nuke versus G2. It's obviously going to be the case. They can't let that through. I mean, despite G2 having that Nuke loss to Navi in the semifinals of the quarters of ESL One Cologne, they've just proven over the past few months, especially Kenny S, that you don't fuck with them on Nuke. So I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that if these two teams should play each other, the SK are just gonna fucking instantly ban Nuke, which is very interesting because that means that SK now have an instant ban they have to go to, right? When going into this matchup, and then I think just to end this, basically this video has been I don't know. It's been kind of ambiguous, right? Because I do think that SK are going to win the major, and I think that they boast the map pool that will allow them to do that. But at the same time, a bunch of these records are kind of an illusion. I mean, honestly, I think that most of these maps, their only actual, probably, considerable opposition is going to be versus, the G2s, the FaZes, and the Astralises of the world, right? Of which there are only them. So, I mean, in series play, there are 3 teams that can beat them. possibly, honestly, two. I'll go ahead and say that Astralis and G2 are probably the only teams that could potentially edge out SK, and out of those two, I think that the only possibly likely one is G2, because I just feel like SK and Astralis, they pretty much have the same game plan, but going into it, SK just has way more firepower. Like, their firepower is way better. It also feels like their synergy among the players is way better. It just feels like the way they can play off each other is going to edge out Astralis's any day of the week. Same goes with the firepower, and I mean, they have somewhat similar map pools, so who knows? It depends on what the fuck Astralis has been doing at this boot camp. Hopefully it's gone well so we can get some competition going into this. But I mean, the important, or the interesting thing rather, going into this major is that G2, have proven that they can take SK on Overpass, on Cash, on Cobble, and Inferno. And SK aren't even going to think about fucking with them on Nuke. So, I mean, that means that basically G2 has like 5 maps over SK, or 5 maps that they've proven over SK. I guess Cash is kind of up in the air. But still, I mean, G2 has proven that they have a pretty good chance at beating SK in a best of 3 series. And I mean, they did do that at ESL Season 5 Pro League Finals. So I do think that SK are going to win the major. Honestly, I think G2 is way too much of a dark horse. I feel like they get, a weird matchup maybe in the quarters. Their tournament run might be over. I mean, we saw it at ESL 1 Cologne. Na'Vi came in. They edged them out on a fucking map like Nuke, right? Which shouldn't fucking happen. So the certainty around G2 it just isn't fucking there, which means that there is uncertainty. And with SK, there's the opposite, because they've proven now 3 tournaments in a row that they will fuck you, and they will win this tournament, and they probably won't stop, right? So I think that going into the major, you kind of have to say that, you know what, SK are going to win it, and that's what I believe. So, just as simple as that. I will say, G2, probably the only team, in my opinion, that are going to be able to edge them out in a best of 3 series. So I think that SK wins this major, unless they face off versus a G2 in, let's say, the quarters, the semis, or the finals. So I think that SK really has to hope that G2 has some fucking terrible matchups in the Swiss system. Because that's fully possible, right? So yeah, SK, they're going to win the fucking major. Unless G2 have something to say about it.